Breaking news, Assembly Republicans oust their leader. We'll talk all about it this week on Next Round. Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute Next Round podcast. I'm Tim Anaya, PRI's Vice President of Marketing and Communications, and with me as always is our good friend, Matt Fleming, PRI's Communications Director. How are you today, Matt?
Good.
Well, I saw a great video the other day where they followed this young man who was going through kind of his daily routine, and he went out to the beach, and when he went to put on his swimming attire, he said, "Tarps off." And I think with this 100 and something degree weather, we're tarps off, no jackets for this week's episode of Next Round. It's too hot.
It's just too hot.
Everywhere you're watching this in California, it's way too hot, and where it's really too hot is under the Capitol dome. So this week, the legislature, watch your wallets, Mr. and Mrs. California, the legislature returns to action, and in a bit of breaking news that happened just minutes before we started recording this podcast, Assembly Republicans have ousted their leader, Heath Flora, and they've elected a new leader, Assemblymember Alexandra Macedo from the Tulare area, to replace him. And you, our listeners and viewers, may not realize it, but you have the two best people in California to talk about this whole thing, veterans of many a Republican leadership change. I went through, well, I worked for 9 different Republican leaders, so that many. Some were more friendly than others. But this was, when we get into it, it seemed destined to happen, but there's a lot that goes into it. So let me set the stage for all of you. So Heath Flora was, we might say, an embattled Republican leader kind of from the start of his leadership, and gotten a lot of bad press recently. And there were kind of 2 big things that were what his caucus members were growing increasingly upset about. The first was there was a vote a few weeks ago before the summer recess on a measure that would, if you cities can only impose a certain amount of local taxes, and if you want to exceed the percentage, you have to get a vote of the legislature to do that. Now, one might think that tax fighters would not go along with such a thing, but Flora did. And that was not met well with Republicans who are fighting the cost of living increases in California. The other thing, and we commend to you, read the California Post story posted on Sunday by our friend Josh Kane, who detailed, wow, quite a web of Mr. Flora's campaign spending, which included $15,000 spent at a place called Chargins, which for the non-Sacramentans among you watching us today is kind of a dive, dumpy/sleazy bar in East Sacramento. My first takeaway from that was, well, that's the kind of place where you pay $2 for PBR. How could you possibly spend $15,000 there in a lifetime, let alone in the months of his report? Matt, what do you make of this whole affair and the downfall of Heath Flora?
Well, I think as far as spending $15,000 at a dive bar, where there's a will, there's a way. Anything
Right.
is possible.
That's right.
Hasn't been a particularly great leader. He's following one of the best leaders in a really, really long time, James Gallagher.
Mm-hmm. Hard to follow a good one.
Hard to follow a good one. I think his fundraising actually hasn't been terrible, so credit to him for that. But leaders raise a lot of money. That's their job. In the legislature, their other job and this is where someone, say like Mitch McConnell, or just to use a different comparison, Nancy Pelosi, were effective, is leading the strategies inside the building. And people could have differences of opinions on what, like the merit of the legislative successes Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell had. But there's no question that as leaders, they were really, really effective. And you can compare them to other people and like see that they were good at they were effective. James Gallagher, I think the main thing he did besides picking up seats, which is noteworthy, was within the legislature. He had the caucus doing things. They were all on the same page. People were happy. They were getting victories inside the building. And they could kind of had their pride about them again. Flora going up on a tax vote is just, especially with no real local connection, is just unbecoming of a leader. He let target Democrats off the hook, which is the biggest sin.
And let's explain that point for a minute, because, the leader is the representative of their constituencies, so obviously they have to represent who sent them there. But then you have a responsibility. You're leading the strategy, you're leading the negotiations for all Republican Assembly members. And sometimes there's votes where you as a leader, maybe you need to vote your district and it's different from how the caucus as a whole would go. But there's a way you approach that. And it seemed that there was no strategy here. You didn't have buy-in from everybody. You didn't have, seemed like they were actually blindsided by the vote. And if we remember the great Frank Underwood, vote your caucus, vote your district, vote your interest, just don't surprise me. And well, when you're the leader, you shouldn't be surprising anybody. But part of negotiating these things, right? And, I come from the era of when we had a 2/3 vote required to enact the budget. And so the minority leader had a lot of influence in that final outcome. We all knew the budget was going to pass in the end, but the leader would make the best deal possible and then, quote, release the members who would be inclined to vote on the budget. That's kind of what should have happened here, and it didn't. And part of that was always an understanding that every targeted Democrat, those are the Democrats who are at risk of losing their seats, every one of them has to vote yes on this controversial bill. And that's what Flora failed here.
Yeah, instead of vulnerable Democrats in this instance, so the same would be true if the roles were reversed.
Yes.
Instead of vulnerable Democrats taking a bad vote, you let them off the hook and then you take deciding votes. And it's one thing when a member of your caucus does it. It's another thing when the leader does it for no reason, doesn't inform his own members, and you can only assume it's for some, I don't know, weird self-serving reason, because it's not a policy victory unless he really just loves taxes. So, he's termed out. I'm sure he's looking at the third house for jobs, and who knows?
Well, you'd hate to think, too, right, that even if some, say, Modesto area city or county wanted this tax increase, well, if it were me, I wouldn't go along with that because I don't believe in higher taxes, and we also have a huge cost of living increase. So there's not a lot of logic there behind it.
Yeah. I mean, like if a city's going bankrupt and it's their only choice.
Yeah.
You could make the case for it, right? Like,
and this is multiple cities, remember?
Yeah.
So it's cities. There are a handful of cities all across the state that want to put these measures on the ballot this year.
And cities are really struggling with real employment and pension costs.
Right.
So there is that. Like there are actual real problems, but again, I mean, he shouldn't have gone up on it. And if he is going to go up on it, he needs to let his caucus know, and he needs to make sure that vulnerable Democrats are also going up. Because what it did was it removed the campaign issue from the campaign, and it's just, and then all of the other ethical stuff aside, there's that part which is pretty bad, but then there's also the affair he had that went terrible with the former lobbyist who's now a mortician.
Allegedly.
While no, she's admitted to it, and I guess he hasn't admitted to it. I don't know.
Allegedly.
Okay, allegedly, but everyone believes it happened. His wife also believes it happened because she left him.
Yes, allegedly.
Well, she did.
She did leave him. Yes.
He's hit for not living in the district, which I guess he has to have some footprint there because otherwise it's illegal.
That's been a big debate for years. There have been court cases involved, right, of what counts as your residency, and elections officials and district attorneys and such have given broad leeway of where they say they live, they do. Obviously, they have to be here 4 days a week, so you're not in the district a lot of time. Now, the vote was, and this is a thing I think we wanted to take our listeners and our viewers in the room where it happens. So how does this go down? So there's 2 votes involved. So the members would call a caucus meeting, and they would make a motion to, quote, vacate the chair. So when you don't have kind of the normal election, like after an election, the office is, you take the vote normally. When it's here where you're voting to oust the leader, that vote was 10-9 to vote Flora out. So that's kind of the Flora yes or no vote. Then you take the next vote to elect.
And that's pretty close, I would guess.
Yeah.
Because there's something to be said for cleansing the caucus of what's perceived as bad leadership.
Yes.
But there's also something to be said for the fact that this is going to be a challenging election cycle, probably, and you're changing leaders right beforehand. And
what's the advice? Don't change a horse midstream?
Don't change a horse midstream. And there is, with all of this happening, it does make his reelection a little bit more challenging, although he's in one of the safer seats, but this certainly doesn't help matters.
Right. So the second vote then was 12-7. 12 voted to make Macedo leader. 7 members abstained. So obviously there's personal loyalty to Heath. There's friendship among Heath. If you look at the vote, it was the newbies that voted him out, those who were in their first or second term, and kind of the old guard are the ones primarily that voted to keep him around.
He's been second in command for a long time.
A long time. The issue, let's go to the issue of why don't you do it now? And the issue is, right, we're in the heart of the end of the legislative session, so you need to have...
Session starts this week.
Session starts this week. So if you're going to be strategic, you can have, you made the point earlier about Mr. Gallagher and his team. They're kind of firing on all cylinders, and that's also inside the building. You can be very strategic with both the policy you advance, but also the votes you take and the votes you can force. Those can be used. And really, since my old boss, Connie Conway, was leader, was really the last time. And a lot of the people, Mr. Gallagher was a freshman during that time, they kind of came up seeing that, hey, if we all work together and everyone plays to their strengths, you can really achieve a lot. So there's that internal dynamic of, well, what we could do in the end of session, now you've got a rookie, both a freshman assembly member and a rookie leader in a very critical period. But then there's the external part of it, the campaign part of it. And, there's an apparatus to get the candidates elected. We've already had the primary, so we have the candidates in place. But, boy, now she's got to ramp up pretty quickly and raise the big money, prove to the people who would give her the money that she's the one, they have a good strategy in place. Boy, that's really hard to do. They may want to change. Sometimes a leader might want to change the campaign team when they come in. Obviously, the leader brings in their own leadership team. Well, that's a real risky proposition. You also, in kind of history shows, when you have a leader that's weak, typically, if you want to get rid of them, wait them out during the election, because by all accounts, this is going to be a challenging election for Republicans. Republicans may very well lose seats in this election. So,
and that's without any sort of tea leaf reading. That's just going off of historical trends with what happens in the midterms after
Yeah.
in the first term of a
Nothing with
presidency.
them,
Yeah.
right? This is the national trends. This is the history, the 6-year itch, if you will, of the incumbent president's party. So, boy, that's really risky for her. That, boy, you could be doing you come in and you could be doing everything right, and then you have a pretty bad election, and you're out in November.
Yeah.
So for her, it's a real risk, and you might almost advise her, hey, cool your jets until November, when this guy might be out on the natural if he had a pretty poor election.
But but at the same time, like, if you feel like you have a cancer, you got to cut it out. And I'm not saying that Heath is cancerous. I'm just saying that it's clear that 10 out of 19 members felt they needed to make this change now, probably knowing all of everything you just said. It's risky. Everything that just happened today is risky. And Macedo is a freshman, which is also risky.
The last freshman, I believe,
Was McCarthy.
who became leader was McCarthy.
Having said that,
And there's no question she came in as a big rising star.
Yeah.
So that she has ascended to the leadership. You know, her mentor is my old boss, Connie Conway. They come from the same geographic area. So that she has been on a pretty meteoric rise. That's been pretty obvious since she got here.
yeah, I think if you look at the people who have been there for a while, they don't strike you as people who really want to be leader. If they did, they would have kind of already done it. So now you're talking like
Because it is also the worst job in Sacramento, and we wouldn't
Totally.
wish our worst enemies having this job.
So like the elder statesman of the caucus.
Yeah.
This is just off. Not picking at anyone in particular. If they had wanted to be leader up to this point, they probably would have been. So it's a lot of like younger people. I think all the risks we've mentioned. I mean, if you had to bet on someone, she's not a bad person to bet on.
That's right.
She has all the makings of a good leader. A new leader is going to make a few mistakes, probably, but she has all the makings of a good leader. She's a good team. It seems like she has a lot of the caucus behind her. I think a lot of the votes to keep Heath in place were probably more pro-Heath than they were anti-her.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine today she probably has a pretty unified caucus, minus maybe one person who's a little upset, which is Heath.
And it's an awkward day. Let's talk a little bit about, certainly as staff, we have experienced this day. I've experienced leaders taken out. I've experienced awkward transitions, even when it was kind of the normal course of events. I remember when I was a young staffer, right, on days when you're trying to take the leader out, that's all of a sudden members would start talking, pss, 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 and they'd be, members would walk into another member's office all of a sudden and shut the door, and they're hiding in corners. It's a very kind of stealth sort of thing. But there's nothing more awkward when you're on the leadership staff and you're having to pick up the pieces, whatever happened.
Also, not quite sure if you're
if you have a job,
if you're going to be there in a week.
right?
Yeah.
Fortunately, I survived them all, but there's no guarantee that you have them all. Especially when you're on the press team, you're for whoever wins. So you might be going for the person. I've had this before a few times, where you work for the person who lost.
Yeah.
And it's a weird spot for you as staff, right? Your fight. I always tell the young'uns at Capitol, that's a members fight. That's not a staff fight. Don't get in the middle of the fight. You rally around the office. You're there to work for the winner. And so I've written many a press release of, announcing the results and the team and all of that. And, it's all the cliches you use, to put a smile like this on your face, and, we're all united coming out.
Yeah.
But I think you're right in your point that I think that vote, the caucus is pretty unified behind her. And I think, too, even Heath's closest friends must realize, read that Post story, that was pretty damning. You can't really recover from that. A change kind of had to be made. I've been in the situation, right, where a member I worked for had a very big public embarrassment, and that member didn't survive after they lasted until the election. but they didn't survive. And really, it wasn't for anything with the election results. I think the election results, if memory served, went fine. It was really the issue was they never got over that public embarrassment with the member. And some of it is image and stature, right? You have to project strength and that you're on it and you got it together and you're doing all the things you need to do. As we close with this here, I just want to go through a little bit of these other kind of points you're mentioning about Flora. So the Chargens bar tab is one thing. There's also an issue of 2 FPPC investigations. And for those of you who don't know the acronym, FPPC is the Fair Political Practices Commission. They're the ones that sort of loosely govern how campaign finance laws are followed. And legislators have to file a lot of paperwork. And one of the investigations is about what they call behested payments. Matt,
which we've talked about a little bit previously because of Gavin Newsom.
That's right. Tell our viewers and listeners what a behested payment is to refresh their memory.
It's convoluted, so Tim will correct me when I mess some of this up. But it's basically instead of taking a contribution from a donor, you're asking the donor to give the contribution elsewhere on your behalf.
Mm-hmm. And so it's typically for kind of charitable purposes. And it sort of makes sense because it's basically a member in their official capacity asking a donor to do something. So the disclosure makes sense. There have been issues in the past, I've had to deal with it a little bit, where...
Because it circumvents campaign finance.
Yeah, there's no limits on it.
Yeah.
And so one of the issues is, say, if you co-sponsor a golf tournament, well, you may think, well, I'm just adding my name of support to an event. Well, technically, you are soliciting a behested payment. So that's the thing where I've had to do where a member put their name on a golf tournament, and then I had to do all this paperwork afterward to do all the reporting to it. So it's unclear in this case if it's something like that or if it's something more nefarious. But the issue, of course, is that...
But they're looking into it, which means...
That's not a good thing.
It at least appears that there could be something there.
And then there's a second investigation into...
And we will say, like, on the behested payments, off the top of my head, I think he raised nearly $3 million, something like that, which is pretty good sum.
Yeah.
And the behested, like 1.7, something like that, which, again, we don't have all the specifics, but if we're just looking at that alone from a caucus perspective, look, if you can get 1.7 for some charity of your choice, you got to be... The caucus has to be looking at it and saying that's nearly half of everything you brought in.
And
or over half.
When you look at the overall picture, you're probably thinking, this guy ain't spending all his day raising money for kids, right?
No, but if he is, we
God
apologize
bless him if he
and
is.
thank you for doing it. Thank you for your service.
But I think that's the thing, right, is if it's a truly noble cause, no one's going to begrudge that, regardless of the amount, regardless of, whether the paperwork was filled out properly. But if it's something fishy, it kind of adds...
Yeah, if it's for like the Yosemite Fund or something like that, or wildfire prevention or something, great, good for you.
So, well, stay tuned. I'm sure there will be more gossip, more dirty laundry for us to share with you next week on the aftermath of the Heath Flora era. So we were going to get into kind of the return of the legislature and all the bills they have coming up. I think this has largely now overshadowed the first week of the legislature coming back. So we'll save all that discussion for next week. But I would say as far as issues, one of the biggest issues really was a campaign issue. It's an issue we've been writing about at PRI a lot. It's probably the highest profile ballot measure on the fall November 2026
There's
ballot.
voter ID too, which is probably the only competitor for highest. I think those two are the ones people are going to talk about. That's the ones your neighbors will talk to you about.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, they for sure will talk to you about that one if you have a Republican neighbor. But this is the wealth tax or the billionaire tax, whatever you want to call it. And it's a very interesting discussion. And this weekend, the California Democratic Party Executive Board voted narrowly to endorse the wealth tax measure in opposition to what the governor wants to what the next governor, potentially Xavier Becerra, wants, and a host of labor unions that are the biggest power brokers of the Democratic Party. What does that vote say to you? To me, this is shocking that they would go against all of those powers that be.
Well, we don't know how hard they were working that vote.
Now, we do know, the story goes, the infamous anti-Maxine, Maxine Waters, had trumpeted the cause and was there working the room, and allegedly the activists were riled up in favor of anti-Maxine. However, what's missing in the story, right, is the Waters family business is running basically a very lucrative campaign slate organization. Now, I haven't looked at the records, but I'm going to guess, allegedly, they may have gotten some payments to the Waters slate organization in favor of the wealth tax, which prompted her whipping some votes in the crowd there over the weekend.
Definitely could be. Could also be that she just supports a lot of bad policy.
There's that too.
Yeah, I don't know how much Gavin Newsom or Becerra were working the room in opposition. SEIU, which is the parent organization to the healthcare workers union that sponsored this, they came out and opposed it as well. CTA, I believe,
is opposed to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it is
Planned Parenthood also opposed to it. I mean, big
names,
big movers in the Democratic Party are against it, and nearly every elected official.
I think, although you only hear about it when it happens to Republicans, there is a similar dynamic happening right now where there's a big difference between activists and elected officials and party leaders. And we've been seeing that basically since the Tea Party movement started, really in both parties, but really in the Republican Party. But with Israel, with a few other key issues, I think you're starting to see it more and more in the Democratic Party. Don't forget, California Democrats wanted Bernie Sanders.
Right. They endorsed...
Who's not even a Democrat.
They endorsed Kevin De Leon over Senator Dianne Feinstein when Senator Dianne Feinstein was old, but it wasn't in much better shape than at the end.
Young Democrats are turning towards communism and socialism, just as they self-identify in polling. So I think that's what it is. I think you're just seeing the generational conflict, and I think also probably a lot of these other groups weren't fighting that hard at the convention. Because I think also if you had all those people there, you could probably have defeated this.
That was the one question I had. Were they all out working it like they should have to defeat it? You've got to think if they were there working it in force, it would not have passed.
Well, and there's a couple hot button issues right now on Twitter and bumper stickers that Democrat voters and politicians seem to care about. Anything Trump related, ICE, democracy, whatever that might mean at the moment.
Yeah.
So
and I think this is kind of one of those.
Wealth tax is sort of one of them, but also like there's a decline of depth of analysis and understanding of issues. People, and I'm only the age that I am, so I can't tell you. It seems like it wasn't like this when I was younger or before I was born, but it just seems like people care about the bumper sticker now. And they care about the fight, and they hate billionaires, and this sticks it to billionaires. And anybody who says otherwise, they're just supporting billionaires, although they never say that about Becerra or Gavin Newsom or
all the multimillionaire, billionaire lefties who are fighting CEQA reform and all of these other, the Gettys and all of them. That's right. To me, I look at this vote, and it's another one of these things like the leadership fight, and we've kind of been there before. For Republicans, basically, and it's changed a little bit in recent years as we've had kind of a weaker state Republican Party, weaker Republican apparatus, basically the organization was rigged for what the legislature and the legislative leadership wanted. They would always be able to control the outcome of the final vote. Yeah, there would be maybe hundreds of activists voting the other way or having a noisy protest, but basically, if the Republicans had their version of this at the CRP convention, it never would have passed because the members would. I've had to go and, when things like this have come up, right, that I'd spend all weekend in a ballroom, with party activists voting on these things. And so that to me is surprising because the Democrats always struck me as much more ruthless about these things, and that Newsom, who's definitely kind of divorced from what's going on, but you would think the legislative leadership would be fighting this tooth and nail, right? This could be, they might lose a seat or two unexpectedly, right, if this becomes an issue. This is not something they want hanging around their neck. So that it was allowed to happen, to me, is the surprising part of it.
Well, and also most billionaires in California, I think for the most part, are Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Well, most billionaires in California have left to begin with.
But I mean, there's still
those
120 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if they want to tax themselves this much, as I argued during the campaign, Tom Steyer would have done a lot better if he had just paid the wealth tax.
That's right.
By example.
That's right.
So I don't know what effect this has on fundraising. I mean, the Democrats are in such a strong position as compared to the Republicans that this probably isn't going to sink their ship, but I don't think it helps. And it might sink California's budget.
That's right. I mean, we've talked about before, and certainly if you read, the many pieces we've put out in recent months, that it's a wealth tax proposal is terrible for the budget ongoing. It's already been terrible ongoing. We've lost billions of dollars in tax revenue permanently because these people have been chased out of the state. And if you really get the real deal, the exodus of wealth from California will be staggering. Now, there'll be some litigation over when does it really take effect, but I think you'll have a lot of people leaving between November 5th and when the election is certified. But
yeah, because it's backdated, right? But isn't that an ex post facto law?
Well, that's the issue, right? I'm sure it'll be heavily litigated, but that was the debate that some argued legally you needed to be gone by January 1st of 2026. I don't know that would pass court muster, but some people didn't want to take a chance. Some people did want to take a chance. Some have left in the calendar year 2026. Certainly, if this passes, well, unless you're a real lefty, you got to figure whatever other billionaires who would be affected by this are going to leave. And that's the foolishness of this whole, of the whole proposal. Now, Newsom is a curious case on this thing, and obviously he's strongly against this measure, but yet, being cutesy, he's for a federal version of it, and I think it's really because this isn't his proposal, and he doesn't control how the money is being spent.
And CTA doesn't like it, and he also realizes that this is what the activists want.
Because the SEIU union that's promoting this, they wrote it to benefit them. And so the money is going to go to their interests and the causes they support. That's why, there's all the criticism of ballot box budgeting, right? Because, well, this isn't just a wealth tax for the general fund. This is a wealth tax for whoever wrote the measure.
And it circumvents Prop 98, which is guaranteed education funding, which is why CTA hates it.
And there's big debates, right, of, well, if it's going to be, there's a lot of competing interests that would want to spend that money.
Yeah.
So very interesting. We'll see how it plays out in the debate. But again, it kind of adds to, it's probably something on the natural that would go down. But 2026, the stars may be aligning that it's for sure the most favorable environment that it could have to potentially pass.
What do you think? If we were going to have a gentleman's bet right now, what do you think? You think it'll pass?
That wouldn't shock me.
I think it'll pass.
Yeah.
Again, this is Tim and Matt, who, as brilliant as we are and able, to predict the future.
We have
We're just spitballing here.
Go back and watch the past episodes of Next Round when we've had our election previews. How many we got wrong?
Mine went down in flames so quickly this year.
Right.
I think it'll pass, or I think it very well could pass. I think it's hard to message against, and I think we're at a time where people have really bought into this income inequality messaging and framing, and I don't even think Republicans really like billionaires.
Right. I mean, that there's certainly something to be said for they're not helping their own cause. But of course, Democrats might want to look in the mirror at the policies they promote, AB 5, things like that, when they're talking about the challenges of income inequality. So kind of along those lines, Gavin Newsom was out and about this past week, and he's been trumpeting California's minimum wage, which is going to rise to, get a load of this, $17.40 per hour starting January 1st. And now the governor, of course, he championing California's fiscal policies, which again, we have a shaky budget and we're losing jobs already and we're not growing nearly as fast as the rest of the country. So he said that he's championing California's fiscal policies that, quote, turn the state into one of the strongest economies of the world, while the Trump administration and the Republican Congress failed to address, quote, everyday cost pressures for working families. Now, I guess he didn't look at, well, what would the impact of this be at, I don't know, things like fast food restaurants that everyday families patronize. He also talked about, in comparing this policy and this agenda with what the Republicans at the national level are doing, he says that California, quote, has chosen a different path, one that rewards work, grows the economy, and puts working families first. And Matt, I know you've written about this, PRI has written about this. If you look at the policy analysis of it, doesn't the minimum wage and the push for higher minimum wage do the opposite of all that?
It might help some people, but minimum wages are shown to reduce hours, reduce jobs, drive up costs. You know, you have to think that there's an inflationary aspect, right? Like businesses are paying more. They're going to pass this on to consumers. The people most susceptible to that, to the higher costs or higher prices, are minimum wage workers. The minimum wage is not, it might have been something back when child labor was a thing and people were working in factories and losing their arms and all that stuff. It's an introductory wage. It's for, lifeguards on the weekend who have a high school job. It's people entering the workforce, people with a side job, maybe retirees, something like that. It's not an actual opportunity agenda. And anytime, and Gavin's pulled this lever a bunch, anytime you see a Democratic politician talk about the minimum wage, it's an economic policy for people who have no other idea. And that's really the truth. This has nothing to do with the size of California's economy, right? It's not going to, that's because of Tesla, Google, Facebook. It's because of those companies. Mm-hmm. It's not because of the minimum wage. Will it help some people? Probably, but a better idea, it's also going to hurt the people who are paying more now and have no job. But a better idea would be to talk about how you can create a better opportunity agenda, a way for people to climb the economic ladder, a way for people to learn new skills, to upskill, to transition their skills to the more modern economy. I mean, there are a lot of things that you could do, and they're a little bit harder than this, admittedly. But it's people who have run out of ideas.
And of course, Newsom has done just the opposite of that with the push for AB 5, the attacks on entrepreneurship, which we know is the surest way to help people climb the economic ladder, make more money for their families, et cetera.
Occupational licensing requirements. California has raised the minimum wage significantly over the last, I'd say, 10 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Where are the results that it's supposed to transform the economy and uplift the poor?
That's right.
All we've seen is our costs go up and wages more or less stagnant. This isn't a real solution.
Now, when I read this, I thought immediately of you, and I wondered this question. Did Gavin Newsom consult our record number of Nobel laureates before championing this policy?
This, for anybody watching this, my favorite talking point is when Gavin talks about how, Governor Newsom talks about how California leads the nation in Nobel laureates. It's like, who cares about that? I mean, that's a nice thing, sure. It's also the largest state.
If you're a laureate,
you
care.
It's great if you're one of the laureates. I mean, California is such a large state that we're going to lead in any sort of like volume statistic. But, in the UC system has a lot of brilliant people, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I don't know. I'm sure he consulted some of the Nobel laureates. I'm sure Robert Reich was really interested in this.
I think so.
The non-economist economist.
That's right. That's right. Well, as we close, we have a little bit of news from the gubernatorial campaign trail, which once again was kind of a sleepy affair last week. But at the end of the week, Steve Hilton, who we've talked about last week and in the previous weeks of kind of what he's doing on the campaign trail. And, I'd be hard-pressed to really disagree with much of anything that he's been doing out there on the trail. And on Friday, he put out a video and he challenged Xavier Becerra to 6 televised debates this fall. And apparently CNN and several television organizations around the state have proposed these various debates. And Hilton says he's accepted every one of these debates. And then you'll have to picture this because we don't have the video clip. He had an empty podium next to him where he put a cardboard cutout of Xavier Becerra, and he challenged him, and he said he's not accepted any of the debates yet, and let's go on. And of course, the Becerra campaign said Hilton was, quote, chasing publicity, and they debuted a new nickname for him. He's Snowflake Steve, whatever that might be. We've talked a lot on this podcast about the debate.
It's just so corny. I mean,
isn't that?
We've called him a dud so many times. It is the most dud.
That's
thing.
A dud nickname, or Snowflake Steve. We talked a lot this spring about the debates. I don't know if you and I have it in us to watch any more debates after the ones we slogged through this past spring. I think if I were them, the best debate was the Nikki Lorenzo one that the Next Star stations put on. So I'd sign up for her debate. Some of the others, I don't know, not so much. But
well, CNN is presumably the great Elex Michelson, who
he has
do a good job.
Moderated many debates over the years, primarily California-oriented debates. He's a very good moderator. That would be one I'd sign up for, and you'd forgive me on the rest, but
we've talked about it. Look, Steve Hilton is doing what every single candidate who is behind, and he started out behind. It's not an insult to him. It's just this California. He's doing what every candidate who is behind tries to do, which is debate. Because the truth is, he's going to do a better job in the debates than Becerra. But we've talked about this. Becerra is a dud. He's going to try to stay out of any sort of the limelight in any way that that could even provide even a little bit of pushback. So he's going to go rail on tacos from an actual brick and mortar store in front of a friendly audience, but he's not going to debate. He'll probably debate once because I think he probably has to. Mm-hmm. But I don't know.
And he says debates will happen. But the LA Times, of course, also notes that he has, quote, kept a relatively low profile since the election with few public appearances. And I don't think you're going to see much of him at all from here through November.
No, look, when you're in the lead, all you can really do is mess it up.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is the smart political strategy there. But also, when you are a dud,
yes,
you also, all you can do by talking is mess things up. He's not going to win anybody over and impress anyone with an amazing debate performance.
That's right.
He can be adequate and not embarrass himself. That's probably his ceiling. So I expect to see maybe one debate.
And I would say, Matt and I unfortunately watched all of these debates in the primary election. I would say Becerra, we always wonder when it's the presidential debates, right? How is so-and-so going to do or not do? And usually the thinking is, whichever the candidate had kind of the more primary debates and had to kind of, get the kinks out, right? That they're more ready to go, right? They're more seasoned with it. They're ready to go. Becerra and Hilton probably had about the same number of debates and forums. I think Becerra was okay. I don't remember him having a particularly horrible debate.
It's not one-on-one, though, in those debates.
That's right. They benefited from, there were 4, 6, 8 candidates on the debate. It's hard to make any statement then. Hilton was a professional, television host and pundit.
Yeah.
That puts you at, even if you're a very good, competent debater, even if you don't fear going into the arena and debating public policy, that is a challenge to go up against someone who is skilled at it. Dare I say, could you imagine if people had to debate us, how poorly they would fare in such a setting? But so it's a challenge when it's one-on-one, and especially in our talking head, talk over one another all the time culture of cable TV news. That's kind of what debates have become, where everyone's talking over one another. We're not, we as voters don't benefit from that because, well, we can't hear anything anybody is saying. So that would be the challenge, right? Is you've got to expect that Hilton is going to be fast and quick and in his face and talking and talking over him. And, Becerra may not come off that great in that environment just for, can the man get a word in edgewise? So, but I don't know, do we have the stomach for 6 more debates this fall?
I know I don't. I don't know what they would talk about for 6 debates, but I pray, candidate Becerra, if you're listening, please don't accept 6 debates. Maybe 3 would be good.
3 might be good. 2 or 3, I think,
2 or
is
3
about
spread
right.
out. 6, on behalf of all political journalists and podcasters and people in this arena, please, or make them only an hour. I could live with that.
That's the other thing.
The 3-hour
right?
epics are.
We just saw a lot of, some of these debates that we sat through, right? They were just too cutesy.
Then they get to the end and they're like, what's your favorite color? What's the best way to cook shrimp? It's just like,
well, don't eat it
boil
raw.
it. You boil it.
That's what we...
Or not boiled, steamed.
Steamed,
Obviously,
right?
everyone knows that. It's a bad debate question.
Right. You want to eat it not gray, but pink.
Not gray, but pink.
That's your cooking tip for today.
That's our policy analysis right there.
Well, on that note, I think we may want to go outside in the 106 degrees and get a little of the sun. So, friends, I hope you'll join us again next week for our look at politics and policy from a free market point of view right here on Next Round. Have a great week.